Welcome to the newest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants, and the Hackensack Meridian Health podcast studio. Keep getting better. John Schmeelk. I haven't had Mike Renner on in a while. Friend of the program. He's been joining us for a long time. He's developed into one of the best NFL and draft analysts around. Also, maybe one of the best mustaches in the game as well. Mike, how are you, buddy?
The mustache is new. So that one has developed of late. I'm doing great, dude. Thanks for having me back on.
No problem, dude. And Mike is now with CBS. You can check him out. He is the Pushing the Pile podcast with Kyle Long. You can find on CBS and CBS Sports HQ, all the other platforms, right? Is basically where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, anywhere you find pods.
So basically, they usually make those CBS guys do like 3 mock drafts a week. I feel like that has not been put on you, which I think deserves a hearty congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I put my foot down real early and I was like, I will do maybe 2 mocks in the pre-draft process and maybe 2 big board updates. I'm not going to be doing the chase content game. Like if people want my rankings, I want them to actually go actively seek it out. I don't want it to be like every single week you get some, slot put in front of you.
I'm with you, and make them go actually listen to the podcast, right? Which I think
Yeah,
is
there
is,
you go.
is important. All right, so let's start here. As you've gone through this draft class, Mike, you've gone through a lot of these. You used to write the PFF draft guide. What's unique to you about this specific draft class? Because as we both know, every one of these classes is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great point. I mean, they all are. You can't. It's something I talk about every single year that just because a guy's top 10 pick doesn't mean that he's necessarily like a top 10 in every single draft. And I think this year specifically, especially when you compare to last year, when I was raving about last year in the quarterback class, people keep saying where are these quarterbacks fallen this year's? Would they have fallen in last year's class? And Cam Ward's the only one who I really would have even put in that mix of the 6 that went in the first round last year. I think the unique part about this class, though, is the depth at running back and tight end. Not every single year. And so it's really going to kind of test the NFL's theories on positional value. Because obviously, there's probably about ever since the 2018 draft, ever since you uniquely know, Saquon Barkley going number 2 overall, there was kind of this war against running backs and the value of running backs that came to kind of a head last offseason. But then if you saw anything last fall, it was like value of running backs kind of shot back up with Derrick Henry season, with Saquon season, with Josh Jacobs season. So we got a lot of good backs in this class. I think it's really going to, where they end up falling is going to be a good indication of how the NFL now sees the running back position. So I think that one, and then the tight end class, there's guys, I have 6 guys in this tight end class that I would give starter grades to, which is crazy. Just year on year, you think about that, 6 out of the 32 teams in the NFL, that's almost, 20% of the NFL coming from one draft class. That's unique. So I do think that those 2 things, it's really going to be interesting to track just where they fall, because
No,
you might be able to get a starting tight end or starting running back at pick 100 this year.
no, I'm with you, Mike, and I totally agree. I think the only 2 guys besides Cam Ward, that I would have in my top 10 in last year's draft are probably Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, right? And then
Yes.
everyone else is probably might be down to like 14, something like that. And I love Mason Graham. Don't get me wrong, but he's still a 298-pound guy that hasn't tested. So,
Correct.
there are questions with a lot of these players. So let's just kind of go to those top guys. We didn't mention Shador Sanders yet. We're recording this, and this is airing the day before their pro day. What are you expecting at the pro day? And do you have Shador closer to Cam Ward or closer to Jackson Dart / Tyler Shook / those other guys on, late round 1, early day
Yeah.
2?
I'm closer to Jackson Dart than Cam Ward. I just think Cam Ward has the complete physical skill set in a way that no one else in this class does. I mean, if you're trying to poke holes in his game, it's with on-field performance. It's not with, his body type, his arm strength, his accuracy, those sort of things that are physical capabilities. He has those that, kind of the guys who play and get to the high end in the NFL have. He has the capability to be like a tier 1 sort of talent in the NFL just because he has tier 1 physical tools. So I don't see that with Shador. I see high-end accuracy. I see high-end toughness. Great combination when projecting the NFL. But there are serious holes and issues to point to in his game that give me pause, really saying, when it's top 3 pick, and especially when 2 guys touched on Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter will be on the board for a top 3 pick. It's hard for me to really go to bat for a guy like Shador Sanders, who even if he hits, just I think like the upside of what he could be is more of a Dak Prescott than a Patrick Mahomes, right? And that's not like obviously the worst thing in the world. Dak Prescott, great quarterback, but like that's just kind of the tier of where he is physically. So yeah, I do think that it's kind of a good second tier of quarterbacks in this class. I think it's a
Yeah.
deep second tier. I think we could see guys like Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, Kyle McCord, Quinn Ewers developing into starters in the NFL. I just don't know if we see high end starters from any of the guys in that group.
Who's your favorite second tier guy? And this will be the last quarterback question, I promise.
I mean, I do have Shador as my QB2, but like my favorite of like the down the board guys of like you're really trying to go sneak some value out is Dylan Gabriel. The guy's played so much football. He's played at a high level ever since his freshman year at UCF back in 2019. And I just think he can play in the NFL. To me, he could be very much like a Brock Purdy, where if you get him in a good situation and he's on a rookie contract and he's cheap, yeah, I think he can play ball. I think he can handle the NFL. But again, I don't think any of these guys after Cam Ward, I would just be very surprised if we ever talk about any of them as like a top 10 to 12 quarterback in the NFL. I just don't see that sort of ceiling from them.
I have chosen to ignore the injuries and age, and I have been, red pilled on Tyler Shook. So that's me.
Yeah. He's an interesting man. I do agree that there is his tape last year was wild
It was
for
great.
it is just so many high level traits to his game, but it's so weird. It's like the guy has played so much football at this point. It's just so unique. It's like, how does he look in the NFL? Where's the next step for a guy who's already kind of at where quarterbacks peak in the league? So it's a weird projection.
If you had to choose between Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, who would you choose?
I would choose Abdul Carter just because as cool as Travis Hunter is, you're really not, it's going to be tough for him to make an impact at two positions. It just is. And Abdul Carter is going to make an impact at the most valuable position, right? And I think like we all know that he's that caliber of football player already that can do that. So I'd lean the guy who again pays the second highest paid position in the NFL, even though Travis Hunter is just like his ceiling is right up there with the wide receivers we saw in last year's class. I think he is special and truly like at either position, wide receiver or cornerback.
All right, and then before we dive into the position group specifically, you mentioned it in terms of position value, right? And I think we're going to see when we get into the back end of the first round here. You mentioned the tight ends already, but we're going to see safeties go. We're going to see a bunch of guards go. I think teams are going to be like, look, we see these players that we think they'll be good starters, and we're happy to get them because we're sure about it,
Yeah.
rather than trying to hunt and peck for maybe put guys with potential at premium spots.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is going to be a more conservative draft where teams are going to try to take guys where they're like, all right, we know what we're getting, and we're happy with what we're getting.
I like that take a lot because I do think after like I said, there's not, it is kind of dry in terms of top end talent. And then there's just like a lot of projects, especially along the defensive line. It's a talented defensive line class, but outside of Abdul Carter, there's not a lot of guys who have really put it into action yet, who really watch them on tape and you're like, they know how to rush the passer already. There's just like a bunch of athletes. So once you get into the 20s of this year's draft, I agree that I think we'll see a lot of people like Malachi Starks, a Georgia safety, people like Tyler Booker or Gray Zabel, a couple of guards interior offensive line, where it's just like they're going to play at least a starter caliber. You got a starter. You came away from a relatively weak-ish first round with starters. Not everyone's going to be able to say that after the 32 go.
It's like, here's Donovan Jackson and Tyleik Williams. Yay. Like, we feel good about
Yes,
that. They might not
they
be
can
Pro
start.
Bowlers, but we feel really good about it. All right, let's go into one other offensive guy, because you tweeted about him this morning. Luther Burden. You mentioned you think it's the first time you've ever seen over a full season where he had more broken tackles than he had touchdowns. And,
First downs.
Luther, what's that?
First downs.
First downs. Sorry, first downs,
yeah,
right.
yes.
So I'm fascinated by Luther Burden because I think he's actually a better contested catch guy than people give him credit for. I think his body control is really good and he break tackles, we know that. But I've also I still have like a huge long scar on my back from the Kadarius Toney situation where he
Yeah.
was a great run after catch guy. You know what? He was a good contested catch guy too. And he wasn't the biggest guy, but he had those traits. And boy, it did not work. And I know Luther Burden is a more polished wide receiver than Toney is, but make the case for me why you think Luther Burden should be wide receiver 2 or 3 right after Hunter and McMillan, ahead of maybe what I would consider safer prospects in
Mhm.
Aguka and Golden, where I think you plug him in as number twos and you should feel really good about it.
Yeah, it's tough, and I do think Burden. I think you didn't know that compared to Kadarius Toney, he's one already better at the collegiate level in terms of like route running, and two, like I think he's like smarter. A big part of Kadarius Toney was just like the guy didn't have it between the ears, right? And that's a big thing though,
Yeah, it
is
is.
that not only is it a position that's growing in terms of how intelligence matters, because more often than not, when teams play more zone, you need to be adept at knowing where coverages are. Like you need to be able to read coverages quickly and be where you're supposed to be, because not every route is a pure man beater, and they're getting less and less man beater routes. So that's more valuable in today's NFL. And just like reliability matters a ton. If you're not in the right spot, quarterback throws the ball, it gets picked off. Like you won't see the field. It just gets difficult to see the field. And that was like ultimately what happened with Kadarius Toney. Said he was so talented, but just like no one would even put him on the football field anymore. So with Burden, I think that he has after Travis Hunter, is the second most impressive just athlete in this class at the receiver position.
I agree with that.
Unbelievable change of direction, short area quickness, play strength. He's got great hands. That's not an issue with him whatsoever, the way it was with like Kadarius Toney. So there's like a lot to like about his game. But if the reports coming out from Bob McGinn, you see on tape that just, they said Monday through Friday, the guy didn't give a darn. Like he was a 5-star at Missouri. They had to pay him to keep him there, had to guarantee him XYZ amount of targets to keep him there. And it's just like, if he wasn't the primary target on a play, he's jogging. If he sees a safety rolled up over the top of him and he's running a go, that goes going at half speed. He was not willing to block in that offense. Like just so many things where it's like, the best thing I feel like that can happen to him is he falls to the second round. Is if you draft this guy at pick 10, because he probably is one of the 10 most talented players in this draft class, you draft him at pick 10, that might be the worst thing that could happen to him, because all the habits that he had at Missouri are just going to carry over the NFL. Then he's going to get rewarded for the fact that he didn't really care last year, seemingly on tape. But if you can get this guy locked in, if you can promise me that he's going to turn it around, like I said, Monday through Friday, you are getting an unbelievably gifted player who, it would truly should be a top 10 pick in this draft class.
And just throwing on top of that too, look, he's missed some games with injuries the last 2 years too, right? In the NFL, you're gonna have to play through stuff. So
Yeah.
we'll see if and that was another issue with Kadarius Toney too, right? Because he could not play through injuries either. So again, I agree with you. He's much more polished and a much better, between the ears, 100% agree. So I'm just curious I've kind of struggled with those three wide receivers and had to stack them. And I think that's a good take. All right. Defensive tackles, Mike. Giants need one desperately. We all know Mason Graham's probably going to be the first one off the board. Once you get past him, when do you start thinking about that next group and how do you kind of stack them for you?
I really like two guys after him. I really like Walter Nolan. I really like Derek Harmon. So they're both top 15 on my board. So I think that. So again, if after that, it's like once you get around pick, 10 to the Bears, 9 to the Saints, I'm willing to consider those guys. More realistically, like mid-teen, something like the Dolphins really to DT, I'd be interested in probably for them, Derek Harmon. But like I think those two guys are awesome prospects in their own right. Harmon more versatile, Nolan more of a 3 technique, but like I love them both. Grant, I'm a little bit lower on just because the nature of the position. I don't think he's ever more than a nose tackle at his size, at his weight. It's difficult to really make that impact outside of Dexter Lawrence. How many guys are commanding big money deals at nose tackle in the NFL? You can count them on one hand, right? It's tough to do, and it's a high variance position because you are so heavy. Minor injuries really strike down nose tackles quickly. And with Kenneth Grant, I don't see Dexter Lawrence, right? I don't see the sheer power, the sheer physicality. So I'm quite a bit lower on him. He would make more sense at like 35 than mid first round, where I've seen him going in mocks. So, those are probably the three after that. But it's an awesome class on day 2. You mentioned Tyreek Williams earlier from Ohio State. I'll throw in guys like Jamari Caldwell from Oregon, CJ West as other guys who can really play, up and down and be plus run defenders. Alfred Collins from Texas. Like there's a lot of good day 1 run defenders in this draft class, and some other guys mixed in that have some upside as pass rushers. So it's a great DT class, especially into day 2.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does. Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
What do you think of potentially that kind of round 3 group of twitchier inside DTs that can get to the quarterback? You have Sanders, right, from South Carolina, TJ Sanders.
DJ Sanders, yeah, Vernon
You had,
Broughton, Texas.
Omar Norman Lott would be in that mix too, right?
Yes, Norman Lott, Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech. There's one more DT I like, Deion Walker from Kentucky as well, who's like one of the most unique DT prospects in this entire draft class.
Dude, I had him as a top 10 player coming into the year, and then I watched his 24 tape, and I'm like, dude, what happened to you?
Well, reportedly, and this comes from an agent, is that he played with a broken back. And now I tend to believe it because...
A broken back?
Yes, I tend to believe it because if you're going to make up an injury, you don't want to make up a back injury, right? Like,
no.
That's not... You want to make up like he had a foot that he was playing through or like an ankle. Ankle is probably your best.
Well, that would make sense
safe.
why
everyone has
bend it all if he had a broken back, right?
Right. So he was playing through that, which I would have, if I was his agent, I would have probably gotten him aside back in like September and been like, hey, you stop playing if you got a broken back. You look like this year. So like, but he's so talented. So I really like that group. He's at the top of that group for me. I think, again, vet that injury for sure. But his sophomore tape is still better than probably anyone else outside of Mason Graham's tape, even this past fall, right? I think it was so good. So I'd still bet on his traits at the end of the day.
I like it. Good call. All right, edge. I think Giants can use some depth there as well. And I think it might even be a deeper edge class than it is a defensive tackle class, especially in that round 2-ish type of area. So once you get past Abdul Carter, let's kind of sort through the first set of guys first, right? That we think will go in the first round. The Mike Greens, the Shamar Stewarts. I don't know if you think Ezraku's a first-round guy or not. People are mixed on him, I know. The 2 Georgia kids, Jalen Walker, Mykel Williams. And I think what I like about this edge class, Mike, it's all different shapes and sizes, right? Like if you want a big one, you got big ones. If you want a stand-up guy that can maybe drop, you got those guys too. So how do you sort through kind of that first tier?
Yeah, so after Carter, I think the two best guys who I would say, like, I feel the best about them actually being good pass rushers at the NFL level are the 2 undersized guys. So Jalen Walker, Georgia, Mike Green from Marshall. They just know how to rush the passer. Like, you drop them in the NFL, they will be effective third down guys. I at least feel good about that. Frame, size, they don't tick those boxes the way some of those other guys do, but I just watch them on tape and I'm like, that works. They got it. So I like those 2. And then there's kind of that other 2 that is Mykel Williams and Shamar Stewart, both projects in their own right. I tend towards Mykel Williams because I see it in the running game and I see it when he does have reps outside. Like, he at least knows what he's doing at times. There are so few reps to point to with Shamar Stewart where it's like, yeah, he knows what he's doing there. Like, yeah, that's like exactly what it's supposed to look like. And I can see the vision of that translating to the NFL. With him, it's just like, can you teach a guy to play football who's Myles Garrett caliber of explosiveness, right? Just like one of the best athletes we've seen at the edge position in the past decade. So those guys are going to be, again, you want the more NFL ready guy, you go Mykel Williams. You want the bigger swing of the bat, you go Shamar Stewart. After that, then I have a little bit of a gap, but then I have Ezraku next from BC. I worry about his play strength. He is like very small framed, even compared to like Green and Walker. He doesn't have a power element to his game the way they do, but he's very polished. He's very smooth.
And he does try versus the run, by the way. He does put effort in against the run.
It's not more that I worry about him being like a liability in the run. I think he can play 3 downs. It's more just he's not going to set a hard edge and he's not going to bull rush off his tackles. And so like his effectiveness might just be limited at the NFL level because of that. But again, I'm talking about this guy who's still like first round, top 32 player on my board. So I do like his game a lot. The one guy I'm like really worried about and more worried about given all the things I hear about him is James Pierce from Tennessee, just because one, I think he's stiff for a guy that explosive. Oftentimes what a guy tests tells you a lot about who they are. Donovan Ezraku doesn't run a 40, but he does all the change of direction stuff. James Pierce just runs the 40 and doesn't do any of the change of direction stuff. It's like, why does he? Well, because he really can't bend the edge well. And he's kind of got this twofold problem of he's super explosive, but doesn't bend the edge well. And he's not a power player. Like, he doesn't have play strength to his game as a pass rusher. You see him try to like swat hands away, and he just like doesn't have a strong upper body. That's a concerning combination for me. I have him lower down the board. And then you just talk to people at Tennessee. I think the quote I just read earlier today was that Tennessee staff, if they said, they asked if you were starting a team in the NFL, would you bring him with you? And they just said no. They wouldn't, the guys on that staff wouldn't bring him to their own NFL team. That's usually a red flag. So I have him actually behind even Nick Scorton, who's the Texas A&M edge, who is another guy in that Deion Walker mold, who his tape was better as a sophomore than it was as a junior. Thought he got overweight this past fall, like visibly. You could see him just heavier on tape. And for a bigger end, he actually is much better with his hands up. Like he's better as a 3-4 outside linebacker rushing than he is hand in the dirt. So he's an interesting guy, not super explosive, but he uses his hands really well and has a lot of power to his game. So I'm a fan of his. But that's kind of how I stack up that edge class.
Garrett also has one of the better spin moves you'll see too. Like he has some agility to him with that big body, but even though like you're right, I don't think he's that explosive. The one guy you didn't mention, and I'm curious what you think of him because I keep watching him and I can't figure out where to put him, is Princely Uman Mielen. You know, I liked his tape. I thought it was good. Then I was up close, right on the field, watching him feet away at the Senior Bowl, and I like, there's something missing here. Like I don't know what it is, but that like he should have been much more dominant against those offensive tackles at the Senior Bowl, and he wasn't. How do you view him?
I'm very low on Princely Uman. I just think you watch his play style, and it is so, I don't know what the right, it's, I don't want to say soft, but it's so finesse. It's such a finesse play style, right? Like he is never attacking down the middle of an offensive lineman. And that's not impossible to get by that way in the NFL. But the guys that do run like 4.4s and they have like twitch for days, they are, your elite athletes because NFL offensive tackles are athletic. And so when you watch his tape and you watch his best reps, oftentimes it comes against offensive tackles that are not as athletic, that just can't match his ability because he has good bend. He is explosive off the ball. His combine numbers weren't great, but he is a plus athlete for sure. I just don't think he's like so elite that he can keep winning that way. And I think that's why you mentioned at the Super Bowl, it didn't look great, is because finally you saw people who were like, hey, I'm going to dip to the outside. It's like they can just reset their feet and mirror that and push him past the pocket. And then he's got nothing else. He's got no secondary counters. So I worry about that because it's been 5 years now where that's like the same play style. And he keeps getting these grades from the NFL being like return to school. And I think it's because of that. He just doesn't have that power element to his game. And then I also always think it's weird when guys go from, I think it was 262 at the Senior Bowl to like 244 at the combine within the space of like 3 weeks. He lost 18 pounds. I'm always like, dude, so what is that guy? So I'm much lower on him than, for sure first round talk, but even like where the consensus is, which is kind of like middle of day 2 now.
Yeah,
I wouldn't even touch him until day 3. Yeah.
How about Landon Jackson? A guy that I think is boring but good, and then he tested off the charts with his explosion. At practice at the Senior Bowl, he was underwhelming, but then he was great in the game. How do you view Jackson?
He's unique in so many different ways. The body type is awesome for the edge position, right? The explosive testing is incredible, but just like that never showed up on tape. His first step as a pass rusher, you would never be like, yeah, that's a guy with a 40-inch vertical, right? It just didn't look like that. But he has come so far, and he's a guy that every single year it seemed like he got better. From 2022 to 2023 to 2024, there was an aspect to his game that got better. And then if you watch Kelvin Banks, if you watch Will Campbell, I think their ugliest reps that I saw from them all year long, they came against Landon Jackson. Like he had reps where he beat those guys, top 15 picks at offensive tackle. That bodes well. So all that being said, I think he's a high floor, but I just don't see the ceiling that just because for whatever reason, you just don't see the sort of twitch, just like the testing doesn't show up on tape and the ability to consistently play with that play speed that it takes to be high in the NFL, you just never see. So I think he'll be a solid NFL player, but a day 2 type of edge.
I'm with you. The inside linebacker class, Jihad Campbell, and you could talk about him if you want. He's fascinating to me. The Giants won't have access to him. I think he has the potential to be just phenomenal wherever you want to put him. You're walking around the combine and all the linebackers are at the podiums, right? You're going up to all of them, seeing what they're doing. And it's the old game that I play with my 7-year-old. Like, you got a group of pictures and you say, well, which one doesn't belong? And Jihad Campbell's just gigantic next to these like 225 and 230-pound linebackers. My goodness, like that guy, he could do whatever he wants to do. I just hope he finds a good landing spot where they use him the right way.
100%. He's what I think you have to look like nowadays to be a top 15 to 20 pick at linebacker. You better have a complete game and be able to rush the passer. And that's what he has. His tape this past year, just like when you're trying to poke holes in it, trying to poke holes in the athlete, you're just going to look a while. I think maybe like the biggest hole is he doesn't have the sort of, on tape, he's not this, he's not like a Luke Kuechly from a processing perspective. He's not a Roquan Smith from just like how quickly he plays in that regard. But it's like his second year as a starter. He's a young guy coming out. I'm really not going to ding him for that whatsoever. I'm all in on him. I think a lot of people are. He's just clean tape.
Anyone interest you beyond that, an inside linebacker that you think could develop into something on day 2 or 3?
I think Carson Schwessinger is very interesting, given that 1 year as a starter, former walk-on, and he's seemingly getting bigger, right? Listed at 225, comes to the combine at 240 and still jumps out the gym with like a 39.5-inch vertical. So really like what I saw from him on tape this past year. Now, linebacker position where you need reps, you need to play. And I think that's why you don't draft him super highly anymore. It's just because more often than not, it takes them a while. But with him to be that good that early, I think he's firmly my linebacker too. And I'd take him somewhere in the early day 2 range.
Nice. Very good. All right. Tight ends, you mentioned what a deep class it is. I'm with you. Does it worry you at all that Tyler Warren has not done one piece of athletic testing? Because it does me. For a position that's very traits-based, and you watch him on tape, I don't think he looks twitchy on tape to me. I think he's kind of like a straight-ahead power athlete. Does that have any concern for you?
It does. I mean, I think he's closer to Michael Mayer than Brock Bowers that people are giving him credit for. Now, Mayer's struggles in the NFL have been somewhat off the field. I don't think that's like a perfect, just because he hasn't worked out great doesn't mean that Warren won't, but that's just the style of tight end you're getting. And I think the other thing that hasn't been talked about a ton is he's 6'6", but he had the shortest wingspan of any tight end measured at the combine. He has 6'4.5" wingspan. He does not have broad shoulders, does not have this massive catch radius that usually you'd like from that type of tight end, right? If you're truly a possession type, and he is. And so if the athletic testing is not going to be great, that's why he hasn't tested. It doesn't worry me a ton. Doesn't show up on tape, but it is a little bit worrisome when you don't have that ability to really go outside your frame or just have this big frame to be that security blanket. So I'm lower on him than kind of this top 10 hype. I don't disagree. He's awesome in line as a blocker. He's versatile. I think he's like incredibly high floor. And if you really want to feature a tight end, by all means, go get him. But I just think there could be, if he goes to the wrong situation, like people are putting him to the Colts. If he goes to the Colts, he might not even crack like 400 yards next year, right? He might not even, he goes to certain situations where it's really kind of, they're drafting because they need a tight end, not because they want to feature the tight end. He may not be an impact guy at all. So that's my worry with Tyler Warren. I do have Colson Loveland ahead of him on my board because of that.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help.
Make sense of your money with Citizens.
Yeah, look, and I think both guys have tail-end first-round grades for me, Loveland and Warren. But I'd much rather draft Elijah Arroyo in round 2, Harold Fannin in round 3. I know people are higher on Mason Taylor than I am. I think he'll be a good player. I don't know if I see like the high end upside with him, but I love this day 2 tight end class. To your point at the start of this podcast, Mike, and I think, and I know you retweeted something about Fannin the other day. That I know he didn't test well and all that stuff. You watch him, no one can cover him. He just gets open and he makes plays and he's a route runner. I think he's really good, and I'd much rather just do a day 2 tight end and he'll be probably not that much worse than your day 1 guys.
Yeah, and Fannin, he's 6'3". He's got a big wingspan. He's almost 6'7". Like, it's bigger than Tyler Warren's that we're just talking about. And he blocks his ass off, even if he's not really doesn't have the size to play in line consistently. He'll block in space as well as anyone else in this draft class. And hands, like I'm a big fan of his. I have him as top 50 guy. I think after Warren and Loveland, I have Ferguson and Fannin as top 50 guys. That
I
they
love
to me are the
Ferguson
two.
too. Love Ferguson.
They're the two most functional athletes after those. And Elijah Arroyo is incredible, like high upside guy, but kind of reminds me of like a Jared Cook, where it's just a little herky jerky. It just doesn't feel as smooth as Ferguson and Fannin when running routes. But he's his speed, like his top end speed, is better than anyone else in this class, and that still matters a ton at tight end, where a lot of times you're just running like drags, seams, those sort of routes. So just getting somewhere fast helps. But it's just I like all these guys, honestly. I think, like I said, so many of them are going to be starters.
No, I'm with you. Who's your favorite non-Omarion Hampton, Ashton Genty running back? There's so many of them. I know we all just have guys that we like their style and how they run. Who's your couple guys in this draft class that you really like?
I love Dylan Sampson. He's the next guy there for me out of Tennessee. I guess I don't get why he's not getting more hype. I mean, guy had almost 1,500 yards in the SEC, 22 touchdowns, was Tennessee's offense. You saw that in the Ohio State game when he got hurt. And maybe that's why he is smaller, bigger injury risk. Already did get hurt last year. But when he went down, they were toast. That he was basically their offense. You're not going to hear about many Tennessee offensive linemen getting drafted this year or anytime soon. It wasn't pretty more often than not there, but went for over 100 against Bama, over 100 against Georgia. I just love his vision and the way he runs. So he's my favorite after those guys.
Sam's what I like about him, Mike, in these short areas around the line of scrimmage, he will just accelerate and run away from guys and make them miss. And it's like just the short area burst for him, I thought was better than maybe any back I saw.
100%. He is. And most guys like that have kind of that trait that are smaller, usually they run away from contact. They're kind of like scared. Those guys like bounce it out a lot, right? I just never saw that with Sampson. I never saw him avoiding contact. I never saw him unwilling to run between the tackles. Like they're mainly running like power in that offense. Like they're mainly running through like straight downhill run concepts. He's not really going laterally a lot, and he's still hitting it the way you need to.
No, I'm with you. Talking to people that you got a lot of sources. You watch Cam Scatterbo's tape, and it's hard not to love it. But I feel like I know the 40 time wasn't great, but we all expected him to be in the 4.6s wherever he ended up running. But from what you're talking to people, why do you think maybe there's some caution flags up on him from people in NFL front offices?
It's just the athlete, right? How many guys there, Kyron Williams falls to day 3. Bucky Irving last year falls to day 3. They still, right or wrong, and I think they've been wrong a lot. They trust, they go for the athletes when honestly, you just got to flip on the Texas tape, a defense that full of NFL players, completely outmanned their offensive line against Arizona State. And he's the one single-handedly keeping them in that game. I mean, he is truly, his ability to run behind poor run blocking was better than anyone else's in this draft class. So I'm a big fan of his. He's going to have limitations, but it's like, dude, at the end of the day, it's how you run, and the way he runs is just, it's how it needs to be at the NFL level, in my opinion.
All right, a couple more here, Mike. Judkins or Henderson? Which Ohio State running back is your flavor?
I mean, Judkins is probably more my flavor because I think he's more of a 3-down back. Henderson, though, in what he is awesome at what he is. And it's a pass protector, space back. That's who he is. You're not putting him in on 4th and 2, right? You're not putting him in short yard situations. You're not putting him in the goal line. That's never going to be him. But on a 3rd and long, there's no other back I'd rather want in the game in this draft class. On a screen, there's probably a few other backs I'd want in this draft class. He just has some electricness to his game in space, and he plays so hard. He's just a guy that you'll want in your locker room. And more often than not, those guys get drafted higher. So I bet Henderson goes first, but Judkins is just more of a 3-down back at the NFL, in my opinion, if you need like a bell cow.
Weaker wide receiver group at the top. Let's take out Tet, Hunter, Egbuka, Golden, and Burden. Of that next group of wide receivers, who's your guy?
I think Jaden Higgins, I feel the best about. He feels like Michael Pittman to me, where it's just, the ball skills, the route running chops. It may never look exceptional, But if that's your number 2 wide receiver, you're happy as heck. He's just like, he is going to get the job done consistently. Great possession type of wideout. Almost like no drops on his tape to speak of whatsoever. Good in contest situations. You're not going to feature him. He's not going to get open a ton down the football field, but just a very solid, reliable target. And I think that matters a lot in today's NFL, like we were talking about earlier.
I like his teammate too, Jalen Knowles. Just a guy that is very different, but I think he flashes some Lad McConkey stuff to me. I think he has a chance to be really good.
Oh yeah, distinctly different types of wideouts, right? Completely opposite end of the spectrum. You go from like possession, underneath intermediate to just pure vertical threat with a little bit more than that. I don't think that's selling him all he is, but he's an awesome. I think he's like the ideal type of slot wide receiver that you want in today's NFL. A guy who can get vertical, also run underneath, but then is physical and really like built more like a running back than a wide receiver usually is built.
Yeah, I just had to talk to him at the Senior Bowl too. Really nice kid, good kid for sure. All right, final position group, and then I got one overall arcing question for you. Guards. Giants need a guard, man. Day 2 guards. Let's say Booker's gone, Zabel's gone. Those are the easy answers, right? Who are these guys on day 2? Maybe it's a tackle that's becoming a guard that you think could be a good fit and gives the Giants some upside on one of those interior offensive line spots.
To me, it's all tackles becoming guards. That is this draft class. I don't think I have a single true guard who I think is going to play guard at the NFL level in my top 100. So it's, if you want a guard in this draft class, it's all tackles becoming guards.
Except Booker, right? Except Booker?
Okay, sorry. Yes, yeah, Tyler Booker.
Got it,
yeah. Yes, and he's top 20. So I love Booker's tape. But after him, it's all, again, converts. I'm trying to think of my favorite one. I have 2 guys who I really like. I think they're different types of guards, though. One's Wyatt Milam from West Virginia. He didn't have a great Senior Bowl in the interior, but like his tape at West Virginia screams guard to me. Just when you saw him on like deuce blocks, down blocking, his ability to sustain and use his hands in tight quarters is awesome. And then Jonas Savvy-Naya is, I think he's a day 1 pass protector, which like he looks, just looking at his build, he looks like he'd be a crushing like run blocking guard. I never really saw that. I think that's a work in progress, but he has some of the best feet, some of the best hand usage in pass pro to be that guy early on in his career at the guard position. So those are the 2 guys who, if I really need a tackle to guard convert, those are the 2 guys I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think 7A is a really good athlete. I'm with you. All right. As of 10:40 a.m. on April 3rd, how do you think the top 3 picks in the draft go, Mike?
I think it goes Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter.
I think that's I wonder what the Browns are going to do, but I'm with you. I don't think, my guess right now, I don't think Shedeur goes in the top 3, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, Mike, tell the folks where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at Mike Renner _ on X, or find Pushing the Pile wherever you get podcasts, or you can tune in. I'm on CBS Sports Network daily doing NFL stuff. So check it out.
Mike, great stuff. Always a pleasure, man. Keep that mustache well groomed. Enjoy the next 3 weeks, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thanks, John. Appreciate it, man.
Mike Renner, CBS Sports and the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time, everybody.